I am Derek Ratchford. I am the facilitator at Sonora Middle School in Springdale. This is my wife, Heather. You want to, okay, I'll do it for her. She is the state Samsung Solve for Tomorrow winner at Fayetteville High School. Her project is awesome, and I love how she brought project development into a lifespan development class and child development. And she'll probably tell a little bit more about that later. But for now, I want to go ahead and get started on how brainstorming and how projects come about at Sonora Middle School. So put it on your head. You all look kind of silly. That's okay. Silly's part of it. At least in middle school, anyway. All right, Heather, what are we going to draw?
Okay.
You got your crayon, right?
I don't know. So you're going to hold it with one hand, right? And you're going to take your crayon in the other hand. Okay. And so first, I want you to draw a circle. So draw a circle. Okay. All right. Now that you've drawn your circle, I want you to draw a hat on your circle.
Oh, I shouldn't have put my crayon down. Where's that circle at?
Okay. Now, draw a body with arms and legs.
I'm going straight stick, man.
Okay. Now that we have our body drawn, draw some shoes on those legs. Just do your best. And now draw a 4-leaf clover on your hat.
Ooh.
And a pot of gold beside your little drawing.
This right here is some good vantage points. I can see lots of really bad drawings.
And now finally, let's add a rainbow coming off our pot of gold. Okay, so you've got your pot of gold. You're going to draw a rainbow.
All right, let's take a look. That's impressive right there. I don't even know what that middle thing is. Hey, my hat's almost on it. It's close.
Okay, so who has a hat on your circle? Who was able to get a hat on your circle? What about the 4-leaf clover on your hat? Almost. Wow.
Okay, we'll come back to that in just a second. But for now, if you guys want a copy of this presentation, I have some links in here for you. You can get it here on this link, or you can scan the QR code. It'll be on there at the end too, so we can come back to it if you want to. Before we start, does anybody know what the most important thing of project brainstorming and project development is? What's the most important thing? Creativity? No ideas or bad ideas. No ideas or bad ideas. Some of the best projects come from bad ideas. That's very accurate. Okay? So how do we get to those things? How do we get people to say those things? Do you all have people in your classrooms or in your programs that are not comfortable sharing right off the bat? It's hard to get them to open up, right? So that's kind of what this whole session is about. It's trying to get you to open up a little bit and making it in the least harmful or imposing type of way as possible. But before we do that, the most important thing is team building. How many of you do team building at the beginning of the year? How many of you do team building at the middle of the year? How many of you are going to do team building when you get back to school? Why do you think your teachers do that? Do what? Build a team. Well, that's a huge part of it, but it's also a way to break down your walls just a little bit, getting you to open up. You've all done team building where it's kind of where you're sitting in a group and you're kind of chatting, is that really breaking down the walls, or is it just one person kind of leading the team building? It's kind of one person leading. The whole point of team building is to kind of get you to open up as a whole group. So team building is definitely the most important thing, but it's also how you tie it back into what we're doing in East. The wrap up is what I call it. Brody and Erica are in here. They're two of mine. They're the ones passing out the plates this morning. They'll tell you that I spend half the class talking about why we do that. There is no team building I ever do without explaining why that is. And I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like in just a second. But these are a couple of ours that we do. These are some of our favorites. This is the first day of school. Anybody ever played that game? You got papers on the floor and you got to figure out the pattern. I make up the pattern, you guys don't know what it is. That's my very first day of school. What do you think my message is? Anybody know? Can you hold it up there for? Anybody want to say something? Yeah. Okay. Very true. What you do on the first week is one of the most important things as a facilitator that you can do. It sets the tone for your program. It sets the tone for the learning for the year. But for this one in particular, and I'm going to go ahead and just say it because we're going to run out of time. But for this one, for me, it's about being willing to take a risk. Is there any possible scenario where you can know that just by being the smartest person in the room? Is there any possible way you can figure that out through strategy? So the message is, in East, you just have to try something. You have to be willing to take that first step and set it on that first piece of paper and hear the words, nope, that's not correct. And then being able to step back up to that line again the second time and try something different. Do we all do that in East? Is that what project development's kind of about? Is everything going to work perfectly the first time? No. That's my first day of school. That's East. This is my day 2. This is a maze where we have random things laying on the ground, and you got to figure out how to walk around them with your eyes closed. You'll notice there's a 3D printer at your first step. Why do you think I'm willing to throw a $700 3D printer or a $500 3D printer on the ground for you to step on with your eyes closed? It is risky, right? So in East, is everything going to work all the time? No. They dropped that same 3D printer off of a 15-foot ladder at conference, and they fixed it, and it was working in the Tinker Space at conference the last time we were here. There's nothing you can do to that 3D printer that we can't fix with a little trial and error. So I don't care if they step on it. You can see she kind of hit it. But when we do that activity, it makes people so nervous until they get to the end. And that's how project development should look like. When you're getting there, it should look like where you don't want to take that risk because you're afraid of messing up. But once you figure out you can do that, it really opens your eyes and lets you start brainstorming. Day 3, or not, probably not day 3, but it's pretty early in the process. Who likes Lava River? Where you got to figure out a way to get across with the paper. That's my favorite. You know what always happens in my Lava River? You get so excited to get here to the end, which I should have put that picture. You're at the very last one, and you just want to jump, right? When you take your foot off and you jump, what did you do to the rest of your team? You left them behind. In projects, when we get to the end point of projects, it's very easy just to say, we've done so much work, let's just give it to our client. What happens if it's not perfect? Did you make sure that all of your parts of your project development, all of your parts of your group checked off on it and make sure it's ready to deliver? Or did you just decide you're going to jump and give it and hand it over? All of that ties back into East. Team building, most people, when they walk into a session with me, oh, I hate team building, right? I don't want to do team building. But it's East. Do you want to do East? That's what team building is. So how does that lead to projects? Anybody have any ideas of how that would help you get into project brainstorming?
For a project, you can't just have one person. You have to have a team. You have to have multiple people. So you need to be able to work well with each other and have roles in your project.
So did all of you come in here and write on a piece of paper? Without hesitation? You just did it, right? You didn't care what you made some of the worst leprechauns I've ever seen. And did it matter? So back to his comment where no idea is a bad idea. You've got to be willing to throw those out there at no expense. That's how we get to projects. It leads to communication in your groups when you start trying to develop projects. But most importantly, it leads to this: trust. You got to be willing to trust when you throw an idea out there that someone's not going to say it's terrible. You just walked through a maze and stepped on a 3D printer and made it through the end. You trusted your person to guide you along the way. Same goes for project development. Same goes for brainstorming. You got to have that connection to what you're doing. So here's some of our projects. This is my first one. This was one of my first projects when I became a facilitator. It was a special one for me just because of that. This is the one that led to our Project Sophistication Innovation Award in 2018. We had a group of kids who, this girl right here in the red shirt closest to the sign, her grandmother ran a residence home, a nursing home basically for elderly people. And she was dead set that's what she was going to work on. She didn't know what she was going to do, but she was going to work with them. Turned out we created virtual reality simulations of past memories for the residents there so they could relive things that they used to do in the past. Next one. This one led to a 2019 Founders Award winner. Kind of the same scenario. One of them had a elderly parent or grandparent with dementia, and they were taking too much medication, and they wanted to figure out a way to limit that and dispense the right amount. And they developed this Arduino-controlled sensor that would release certain medications that looked like a fun Gumball machine. So because they didn't want it to be intimidating to the grandparent, so it would release the medication at the right time, and then it would send them a message saying your medicine's ready. And then you all know this one. I'm sure this one's been everywhere. Arkin 3D printed his own leg. It was his own. It was personal to him, right? So what do all those things have in common?
They're all personal.
All personal.
They're helping people.
So when you're trying to come up with ideas, do we have to say those things that are personal? Would we have ever, I'll be honest, his elementary facilitator had him for 2 years, didn't know he had a prosthetic leg. He lost his leg at birth. He was so good at hiding it that you never knew. He was a little short kid. But when they figured out that, it was his mission to try and 3D print it. And once that personal connection came out, he worked harder than he ever worked before. Okay. But how do we get that personal connection? This is kind of the way I've done it the last few years. It works for us. It brings down the walls and the barriers a little bit because you can all do it. And we're going to do it kind of together, okay? I want you to take a second, think for a minute. Where have you been the last 7 days? List all of those places in your head. Think through it. Maybe on a bus. Have we all been to the Hot Springs Convention Center? Have you all been in a hotel for the most part? Those of you who live close. What about your house? Been there in 7 days? Anybody go to a church in 7 days? Anybody go to school in 7 days? Okay. Number one, always the first thing on the list is your house or apartment complex. Okay. Then you're going to have the random things: a veterinary clinic, a sporting event, friend's house, your car, the bus ride on the way to school. All of those things are going to come out. And you need to list as many of those things as you possibly can. Think through it real close. One thing I'll caution you about, well, you're also going to have those things that are very specific to certain people. Like for you guys, is anybody else from your program going to be at the Hot Springs Convention Center in the past 7 days? Besides the people that are on your conference team? Probably not. So you're going to have some things that are specific. And we'll get to that in here in a minute. But then you're going to have some things that, like a restaurant that just popped up, that you need to be very specific on. Do you think it's important to say McDonald's or just a restaurant in general? Okay, so then as a facilitator, I'm going to say, do you think McDonald's is going to let us come work with them and develop things for across the country? Okay, so that's where we're going with that. As a facilitator, that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I would encourage you guys to do if you're doing this activity with your classmates. When they start saying things like that are big, wide chains, you're going to need to talk about why that might not be the best partner or client for us. Okay, and that just gives you something else to say and talk about. But make sure you have all of these things here. This was the first thing we did this year. What I do from there is we take a piece of paper and we write every one of those places on a sheet of paper on an individual sheet. Okay? We keep it anonymous. So what we do is we line up in a big kind of gallery walk for you facilitators, teachers. And everybody has to walk around the room and they have to write one thing on every sheet of paper that would be a problem with that place. Okay? So think for a second, what are some problems with your house? If you had to brainstorm some problems that you have right now with your house or your apartment complex, what would they look like? Your fence has gaps. Your dog can run away. Any ideas how to fix that? Maybe? Can you hold that up for us so we can hear her on the live stream? Brody, can you kind of do that too?
You can get a new fence.
Getting under the fence? Okay. What else? Anybody else have some problems with their house?
A very, very loud dishwasher.
Your dishwasher?
Yeah, it just goes on.
Okay. So does it leak? Could it leak overnight and might maybe cause problems that we don't know about if we're sleeping? So maybe a water sensor underneath it would detect if something's leaking and it would wake us up at night? No idea is a bad idea. Okay? All right. I'm going to go over a couple of mine. This is where it gets personal. This is why the team building is important. Okay? If you'll notice on that page, there's some harsh words there. This is where a lot of our projects came from this year. And it was heartbreaking to watch. It was heartbreaking to see, but it's also the most meaningful experience I've ever had as a facilitator. On this day, in one day, we had 13 people report they were being abused by a parent. We had 5 people report that they were being sexually abused by a neighbor or a parent. We had 3 people report that they were living in a house with dog feces or rats. We had 5 people report that they had no beds in their house. Out of 112 kids, a third of them reported something that would be considered a hotline call. Do you think that's meaningful? Do you think that's where good projects come from? You have to break down the barriers. It goes back to team building. You have to be able to do the team building to get to that point of trust. But what made them willing to say that? They had trust, but they also had anonymity, however you say that word. It was anonymous. I couldn't determine that. I don't know who said what. As a facilitator, that breaks my heart. But also as a facilitator, that's one of the most meaningful times that I've had as a facilitator because I know I can help. I know we can help. When you throw those statistics out there, it's eye-opening. And I would venture to say it's the exact same thing in your classrooms, especially coming out of COVID. So how do we get there? How do we make sure that we are reporting things and doing projects that are meaningful? Because we all know, we've all heard our facilitators say this, if it's personal to you, you'll work the hardest you've ever worked because you want to finish it and you want to succeed. But if you're not willing to open up and share what's meaningful to you, are you ever going to have a sustainable project? So it kind of works both ways from facilitator to student. And this is the number one reason why I wanted to bring this session to you guys today, instead of being at summer seminar where we talk to facilitators. Because it goes back on you guys, and you have to be willing to get your classmates to open up. But also, the other stipulation I have is everyone has to write something. I will stand there and wait the whole class period until someone writes something on a sheet of paper, on each sheet of paper. Because I don't care who you are or where you're at, you can find something wrong with every single place on that list. Your house, something like a fence, letting your dog out. I can think of so many projects that can come from that. But I didn't know your fence had a hole in it. Neither did anybody else in this room until you said it, right? So are we willing to say it in order to get the projects that we need? Okay. Next step. What's another thing we have to have in a project? So for me, sorry, Tammy, I'm going to say this out loud, and you just keep the recording quiet, okay? I don't use CART. CART for elementary and middle school for my program is really hard to understand. We go back to what does a problem have to have, and that's a client and a problem, a partner that's willing to help you, technology, and teamwork, or a group. Okay. So out of that list, the next thing on there is the technology, right? How do we take your fence problem and turn it into, and apply technology to fix that? Could you use SketchUp to design a new fence? Could you 3D print or laser cut a place to go into the fence and attach it? There's so many ways to do that if you know what the tech does. And I feel like that's one of our biggest struggles in terms of our programs and knowing what all that stuff is in the closet. Or in my case, laying out all over the room, because we don't have any storage. But what does the tech do? So before we get in, the way my class works is we do that activity and we kind of sit on it for a little while. We process it. And then we go into the technology. And then we write, and we talk about different things of what the technology does, because how can you fix the problems if you don't know what the technology is? What does it do? Oh. What tech do we have? Do you know what's all in your room? Or do you know the 3D printers in the back corner, you know, laser cutters in the other corner, you know that there's a Mac on the table, you know that there's cameras in the corner. What else is in the closet? And that's kind of what we need to do, is better job as facilitators and students of inventorying and keeping track of what we have and what it does. You guys have all seen this awesome poster. This is the newest version, I believe, right, Tammy? I found this on the website. This is the newest version. It kind of has everything. This is not the version I have. Mine's much smaller, bigger boxes here. These are really hard to see, but it lists out all the hardware in your classroom. It also lists all the software. When I'm brainstorming projects, I don't talk about the software yet. Software's later on down the line. Once we figure out a problem and the tech to apply it to, then we'll figure out what software works best for that. So I only focus on the hardware first. And then I take the things that we have in our room and I put them on this wheel. And if you guys get a copy of the session, there's a randomizer link to that, the one I use there on that list. But before we can start spinning the wheel, we got to know what's in the classroom. These are some of the things that we have. Does anybody know what a sewing machine does? Okay. A lot of people say that, but can you prove it? We're going to come back to that. Game design. You know how to build a video game? I don't care about the software. I'm just asking you, do you like video games? You know what they are? Okay. 360 touring cameras, 360 camera. Laser cutter, augmented reality. What is augmented reality? Brody, bring a couple up here. Tammy, am I good on time? What's augmented reality?
Augmented reality is a mix of reality and VR or so, where you use a camera and it should have projection. Like Pokemon Go, that uses augmented reality. It's a mix between VR and AR.
That's very true. I kind of explain it in that same manner. I bring up Pokemon Go, but also I like to tie in the idea that virtual reality is where you put yourself in a virtual environment, where you put on a headset and you disappear into some other universe, right? Augmented reality is where you bring that universe to you. You're still in the real world, but you bring that virtual environment into your world. So we had a project. We've had multiple augmented reality projects, but the one I like the most is we had bicycles. Our problem, they commented about our school and the problems we have, and one of them was bicycles. When we're out riding, we don't know how to fix them. So they developed some augmented reality where when you scan that part, it gives you instructions on how to fix that while you're out from your phone. So you can learn how to take the chain off and put the chain back on from your phone without having to Google stuff. It's tied in specifically to that specific item. But augmented reality is where you bring that virtual and that digital world into your environment. Virtual reality is the opposite. App development. I think we all know what apps are. We have them on our phone all the time. Mapping. Mapping. If you hear the word mapping, what do you think of? Google Earth, right? How to get somewhere, how to drive around. But what is mapping in the GIS world? It's data. Data that drives what we do. Data that's important for us to make decisions about things. So whenever I try to explain mapping, it's about how do we apply data to new ideas and how do we use that data to figure out how to fix something. Every project you have, I don't care if it's the bicycle project that I just talked about, you can apply mapping to that. You can apply data to that, the research that can come from that. Now, do I always know how to do that? No, I'm the worst mapper in the world. But I can story map. I have a lot of kids that can map, but it's about how to apply that. So don't dismiss mapping when it comes to a whole project, whole program. Arduino and Raspberry Pi. You may know the difference in the two. Arduino is sensor-based, where you give it a command and it does something in response. Raspberry Pi is more like a computer. It'll do a whole lot more. It's kind of sensor-based too, but it's more of like a computer part. It has Wi-Fi built in. It has Bluetooth, and you can hook up peripherals, which are like your keyboard and your mouse. You can't really do that to an Arduino. 3D scanning. Does everybody in here have a 3D scanner? Okay, put your hands down. Does everybody have a camera in your classroom? Then you have 3D scanning. It's called photogrammetry. And being able to know that you can 3D scan and use some software on Autodesk to 3D scan using a camera kind of changes your approach to what you're learning. And if you don't kind of approach that with everything that it can do, you might not get the best projects. Okay, and then drones. Does anybody know that drones can also do 3D scanning and they can do mapping and all that stuff too? They're not just for fun flying. Okay. So that's kind of how I approach the tech side of it. We kind of explain it. Next, we randomly generate ideas. We take your place, so your house, right? We pick out one problem off there and we throw it in the random generator, and we have to apply tech to that. So your house, how can you fix a problem using a 3D printer? That's where we're going. Okay. We've got a few more minutes left. But before we do that, before we open it for questions, I want to do one thing. This kind of goes back to that slide, this one right here, of mine. This was my message to my kids. I want you to take that plate back out for a second and your crayon. Don't put it on your head, just take it out for a second. Hold your crayon in the air. I want to see it. Now, the teacher in me, this kind of breaks my heart, but the message is important. I want you to take that crayon and break it in half. I want you to take that part that still has the tip on it, and I want you to write your name on your piece of paper. Anywhere. Did it work?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The message I want you to take from here and take from this class is this. Even if you're broken, if you're feeling these things, if this is the worst part of your life, even the most broken crayon will still color. I don't care how bad your situation is. I don't care what you're going through. You still have potential. You still have brightness in you. You still have a message to tell, and you're still worth telling. And that needs to be your message to your classmates. Okay? If you want to get into projects that matter, you got to make it personal. Showing them that they're more than their current situation is how you do that. So feel free to break all the crayons you want to do to explain that to them. But even if you're a third of my class who is broken, you still have value. Does a kindergarten class throw away all the broken crayons?
Yes.
Or do they still kind of make art with it? Do they melt them and turn them into a beautiful piece of art? Do they recycle them? Is trash recycled and turned into something new? If you're broken, you still have value in East, and that's the thing I love most about the East model, is it allows you to give back and allows you to show the community that you're more than they see you. Okay? All right. So I don't have a whole lot of time. My plan was to actually let you brainstorm some projects in here, but we don't have a lot of time. But if anybody has questions or wants to hang out and ask me and try to brainstorm some stuff with me, I'm more than happy to do that. But Brody and Erica, stand up. These two are mine. They go to Sonora with me. They have microphones, and I would love for you to ask questions and talk through the process that we do. Also, I would love for Heather to kind of share about her projects, because I didn't let her talk at all because I'm that kind of person. I'm very passionate about what I do. Actually, Heather, go ahead my bad. I'm a terrible husband.
Okay, so anyway, I was going to say that sometimes we think that these projects have to be like super deep, and like I spent a lot of time in his classroom. Any of you that know me know that that is the case. Until this year, those are like, we hardly ever see her. But before, like I was in there all the time. So they don't always have to be super deep projects. So I'm a cheer coach, and my girls saw him strolling our baby across a gravel parking lot. And they're also in my lifespan development class. And they were like, we were trying to come up with some passion projects and really kind of change up the culture of learning in those classes instead of just like sit and gets. So I was like, let's work on some project development, and they trust me because they trust me with their life, right? Like we throw them up in the air. So we didn't really have to do just a ton of that team building part because we were already through that. But they saw this and they were like, you're going to give that baby shaken baby syndrome. And so that's a really bad thing. But I was like, oh, I don't know about that, but what could we do? And so we started talking about, in Fayetteville, there's all these biking trails and stuff. And like we just let it kind of organically develop. But it wasn't from like this really deep place. It was kind of from this fun, lighthearted, joking situation. But they do have that trust to just say whatever to each other, say whatever to me. They know that I'm not going to ever, doubt their ability or come down on them for something that's silly, because it was fun. And then we put that project in, and he actually kind of made me do it, and we submitted and we won, and then we made our video. And I never in a million years thought that these 3 cheerleaders were going to win this, just because it's mostly STEM classes or East classrooms or whatever that are winning these Samsung Solve for Tomorrow awards, but they did. And so now everyone's kind of looking, and you can change your whole school. You guys in your East classrooms, you can change your whole school. Your whole school will want to start to incorporate projects and problems and really go from that place if they see you guys doing it. I've seen it there, and then I've seen it in my school, and I just think that's really powerful that you have that ability to not only help in your community, but help those other kids in school that don't have the opportunity to do East like you do, because once they see how much you're learning and how much you're growing, then they're going to do that as well in their classroom, and they'll start incorporating some of those things. So that's all I have.
Sorry, my bad. I talk a lot.
He's just really passionate.
When it comes to East, I'll talk all day. Any questions for us on how we do that? Well, I told them back there in the beginning that I was going to wait for Q&A till the end, but I totally messed that up too. That's okay. We asked a lot of questions in the middle.
You got a question?
Are you gonna find more crayons? Because we just broke all of your crayons.
No, they're reusable.
We're just going to put them in a box.
You're going to give them back to Brody on your way out the door. We do not leave trash anywhere in the convention center, right? So make sure that there's a trash can back there by Miss Tammy on your way out if you want to throw your paper plate away. But also feel free to use it as a reminder of the team building that we do. We chose that team builder when you came in because it is very least restrictive. It is funny when you turn over your plate. Did you have to talk to anybody? Do you have people in your class that don't like to talk to people? That tell you they don't want to do team building because they don't want to talk to people?
Then if we all look at these.
We just showed you that you can do team building without having to talk to a soul.
Oh, we got it.
Yeah.
You ask if we have people in our classes that don't want to do team building. How do you handle that with students that don't want to do team building? How do you motivate, encourage, include them, and make them participate?
Brody, you're in my class. Does that happen sometimes?
Yes, I guess you could say that.
So the way I approach it depends on the timing of the year. If it's the very beginning of the year, I'll let it go, and we'll work the team building around them, and they can sit there and watch us for a few days. Everyone's on a bit different pace and different scale, and I think that goes back to them being able to trust me too. So I'll just tell them. I'm open with them. Okay, you don't have to do that, but you're going to one of these days, and make them sit there and watch. But also, I remember that as a facilitator, it's my job to make them all get involved at some point and open up and find ways to get them to share. So I might change up my team building plan around that. My whole first 3 weeks is team building. And we linked in on that session card some of the team buildings that we do. They're mostly from the Facilitator Toolkit that you can access, but I've found that if I do things like this my first day activity, I'll go back to my team building. This page. I found if I do things like this first, where they don't have to try, because honestly, it becomes kind of chaos, and I don't know that everybody tried it, and they know that, because it's just constant. Yes, I'm looking at the paper. Yes, that's right. No, that's not. But you'll see that which kids jump back up in the line and try again. Jump back up in the line and try again. If there's still some sitting on the side, I'm okay with that. Eventually, they'll get there. But if I do the messages right and I can tie it back into the East and the East model and why we do them, I found that in a few days they'll jump in. But it's kind of just playing around with your team building and figuring out which one. Erica? Yeah.
In my class, I've noticed that several students don't like working together. Are there any ways that could kind of help with that?
That don't like to work together?
Yes.
My rule is that everybody has a group, and then that's kind of the 5 standards that I throw out there. But do we have some introverts in our program? Of course. People who don't like to work together. So, like, I have some that are doing animation and drawing and things like that aren't working with partners. But the goal is that they can build skills that they can help other programs. When I was doing judging yesterday, there was a program who was doing some awesome stuff with podcasting, and they were doing some awesome stuff with the recycling that I was impressed with. They had another project they were presenting that was about animation. I can think of so many ways that you can tie each of those projects back to animation. And when you make someone feel like they're the expert and you can let them offer advice on how to do something, I found that they eventually will start working with the group. I am of the mindset that I don't push people until they're ready. Well, kind of, until I think they're ready. So if they're shut down in the corner, there's a reason for that, and it might be one of these things. Man, that's a lot of animation. It might be one of those things.
You're out of time. You're out of time.
Okay. We go.
I mean, also, we both kind of ran our classrooms prior to East ever coming into either one of our labs through team building, so building those relationships is just super important. It's how we both work as teachers, and we really get to know kids.
As a facilitator, as a classmate, you have to know and be able to recognize or be able to appreciate where someone's coming from and what their background is. The best thing about East is that you can have a perspective from every type of person. I have self-contained special needs students in my classroom who are participating just as much as the others. I have ALE kids who have been considered kicked out of school in my program that have perspectives that I can't bring out from everybody. So don't push them until they're ready, but also push them a little bit when they get there. So just because someone's sitting back in the corner and working doesn't mean they're not building skills that can help you on and build a team later on. Okay? All right. Come find me. I'm in booth 1013, or my kids are. They'll love to tell you about anything we do. Sonora Middle School.
It's been the kind of year I'd be fine if I forgot you. But I'll never forget it as long as I live, and that's saying a lot. The wildest menagerie of unfortunate, crazy things, and now it's all over. So raise up your glass.